Hello and welcome. I'm Jay.
And I'm Robbie.
You're joining us for episode 29 of Generations Apart, the show where we talk about gaming and technology across the generations, sharing our perspectives on the past and our excitement for the future. On today's episode, we're taking a look at the next generation of games consoles as rumours of a PS5 Pro and a new Nintendo Switch coming in 2024 gather pace.
From farm to PR, we've come quite far, generations apart. Discussing tech that's shaped who we are. Where the joystick or touchscreen, we've all played our part. United by gaming, bridging the gap with voices that never falter.
Before we get into that though, Robbie, what has piqued your interest this week?
So this week, I was doom scrolling as I sometimes do, trying to limit it as much as possible. But I was going through YouTube Shorts the other day, and a video popped up that kind of blew my mind. I'm going to bring it up on screen. You can see it as well. But essentially, there's a guy, UFD Tech, and I think I've mentioned one of his videos before. He does tend to have some mind-blowing videos that he brings up. But basically, he talks through in his little video that the Windows 10 background, if you remember, it has that kind of bluey light glass effect through the Windows logo. Everyone assumes it's CGI, but actually it was a real photo. So it looks incredible, just the digital effect, but it is actually a real for Windows with different lighting going through it. And that's what the Windows 10 background has been for years. Never really thought of it as possibly being real, but there you go. The Windows 10 background with the glassy lighting effect that comes through is a real photo. Obviously heavily edited. I think they did several different lighting configurations for the photos and then combined them all into this, elaborate lighting effect. But it was a real photo, which kind of blew my mind. And I thought you would really like that one because you're into photography as well.
I am, yeah, and I had no idea. I mean, I'll be honest, I changed the default backdrops on most of my machines fairly swiftly.
Yeah.
So the sort of built-in wallpaper doesn't last very long, but I do remember it. And of course, on sort of like corporate machines, they tend to last a bit longer. So yeah, I had no idea.
Can you
Like
imagine the lighting
just
rig
assumed.
that they'd have had to set up for something like that?
No, I can't. And I imagine, looking at the clip you're sharing there for those on audio, that it's kind of going through all of that breakdown and how it was produced. So
yeah, I think
quite
there is a
interesting.
YouTube video going through that. So I'll hunt that out, as well as I'll post the link of the short, as well as it looks like there's a Windows 10 how we made it kind of thing photo video on YouTube. I'll hunt that out and put it in the show notes as well. But I thought that was really cool. I'm not really into photography myself. I don't know much about it, but that looked like a really impressive shot.
I mean, I'll be honest, I would consider myself an enthusiast rather than in any way an expert. But even just the small amount of time that I'd spent when I was learning studio photography, the sort of complexity of lighting and how long it takes to get these set up is unbelievable. So yeah, I mean, something like that would have taken hours, if not days, potentially, of shoots, reshoots, tweak that, move that, kind of adjustments. And then, of course, all the post-production as well. So yeah, that's really cool. I like it.
Cool, isn't it? There you go. So that was my peak to just what's actually, I have a cheeky extra one, which is for those watching YouTube. I got a new drum kit. It was my birthday on the weekend, so I was donated a drum kit to the studio. So that's an extra thing that piqued my interest this week. It's another electric kit with mesh heads, a Gear for Music one, which I've been having a lot of fun playing on. But anyway, I cheated a bit. I've got two. Two peaked interests.
And you've managed to pick two that really don't consider audio-only listeners in the slightest. So I'm going to flip it on its head and give you one that is solely for the audio listener.
Bring it on. Bring it on.
So I bring you something from a company called Sono AI.
Okay.
It's called Chirp, and it is a generative AI product, shock horror, that allows you to do two things. So first of all, you can take existing lyrics from songs that you love, put them into this platform, and it will re-sing them and re-put them to new music. You don't get to choose the style or how it's done, but it will recreate, your favourite song in that way. The version, though, that I've brought you is the sort of next level of Sono AI and Chirp, which uses GPT, I think it's ChatGPT, to generate you some lyrics based on a prompt. So I provided it with a prompt about Generations Apart. And it provided me with this short 20-second extract, which our listeners on this episode have already heard, because James from the future is going to insert that for fun instead of our theme tune this week. So it's only really new to you, Robbie, but I'd like it, if you wouldn't mind, just playing it for everyone and mainly your benefit.
Yeah. Oh, God. Here we go.
We've come quite far, generations apart. Discussing tech, that shit too we are. Where the joystick or touchscreen, we've all played our part. United by gaming, bridging the gap with voices that never falter.
Oh, God, that's a lot.
So I never said it was good. I just said it was interesting. What I think's really fun about it, though, and actually there's better examples on their website. We'll share a link on how to get started with this platform. It's all through Discord, much like some of the other sort of Gen AI solutions.
Yeah.
But they have taken sort of famous song lyrics and then pushed it back through this platform, and the sort of vocals and the music and the style, more specifically, are completely changed and transformed. You get something completely new. And I thought it was really interesting, just really fun. I think the quality is not quite there, and I'll be honest, this example was not the best of the handful of things I did. I got a really good one that came back in a very kind of like Eminem sort of style. It was sort of rapped.
That's what we need.
But with Eminem's kind of style. Yeah. The problem is you can't specify, so you can't tell it what style you want at the moment. That might come in the future. But some of them were really quite interesting, quite compelling. The music was pretty decent on some of them. The audio was pretty good. But if you think back to where we were with things like Midjourney for image generation 3, 4, 5 months ago and beyond, and where we are now, think about where this tech could go, and some of the stuff we've already heard when it comes to kind of AI music generation. This was done in 30 seconds, off the back of a couple of lines of prompt. I didn't get to affect the lyrics. That was all done for me. I didn't choose the style, but I liked it. It was funny, and I thought you'd appreciate it.
No, that's very impressive for 20 seconds of work. I think you can see it being, when it's fully developed, a podcast theme tune or any kind of theme tune, short clip kind of audio format. You can see that being really, really useful for creators like us who are just starting out.
Essentially, more gifted musicians, people who can write lyrics, maybe yourself, might find the outputs to be more successful. I mean, I literally gave ChatGPT a short prompt about the podcast. It wrote a questionable set of lines of lyrics, and then it tried to sing them. Maybe you get better results if you feed it better lyrics. I don't know.
Maybe.
But have a look. Something to play with. It's a lot of fun, and it just made me laugh.
Yeah, I'll check that out. Check that out.
So there you go. That's our piqued interest this week. But let's get into the main meat of this episode, which is all about the console rumours that are swirling around the internet at the moment.
Exciting times.
Both, yeah, indeed. So both in Sony and PlayStation's camp, but also now more recently in Nintendo's camp, as some slightly firmer details, all rumours still, but firmer details in terms of the leaks have started to come about the spec of both machines. So I thought we'd start with the PS5.
Okay.
And I've done a little bit of digging. I've tried to kind of consolidate. We'll share links to the articles that we used for this. But I thought I'd just kind of summarise this for you and bring it to life for you. And then I want to get your take on the spec that's been rumoured.
Okay.
So first of all, it's been three whole years, if you can believe it, since the PS5 launched, which seems to have gone in the blink of an eye. I didn't realise it was that long. But it was 2020, of course. It was the height of COVID.
Lockdown.
We've had lockdown, supply issues. And, 3 years on, those supply issues have now only just really begun to ease. And you can now buy the consoles readily available in stores. And, of course, we've also got a new bit of hardware to look forward to this year, which is Project Q, which I think they've all but confirmed is happening this year without giving it a firm release date or price. So we're now into kind of the rumours of the next console.
Yep.
Now, this isn't PS6, to be clear. This is that kind of step change PS5 Pro, most likely, or something to that effect. And there are rumours that this console is already being shown to developers, codenamed Project Trinity, which is apparently in keeping with their previous Matrix connected code names. I didn't know that.
I didn't know that neither.
No, I didn't. So I'll give you some of the rumours of what's going on with this, and then I'll tell you a little bit about why this is very credible, I think, and likely in terms of Sony's history. So in terms of leaked spec, I'm going to try and pick some of these bits up. So they are saying that the console's WGP, its work group process, is said to be at 30, if that means anything to you.
Work group process.
Which means that basically the console will have a total of 60 compute units, which will be 24 more than the original PlayStation 5. So double the compute units, whatever that means. And in addition, it will have 4 more compute units than the Xbox Series X, which is currently the world's most powerful console. So pure power, this Pro console would be marginally more powerful, which I thought was quite interesting, than the Xbox Series X.
Yes, yeah, because famously they were always slightly under the power, right, of the Series X.
Well, you say slightly. I mean, we're talking about near double compared to the PS5, but only 4 more compute units more than the current Series X. So that means that the Series X and the PS5 are, in this particular space, are already quite far apart. Not that it seems to be making any difference to the quality of the games or the sales. Another leaked spec is that the PS5 Pro will feature 18,000 MTs of memory, which is 4,000 MTs more than the original console.
Mega transfers, yeah.
There you go. I knew you'd know what it meant. So that's 4,000 more than the current generation. So again, is that good? 18,000 up from 14,000 by the sounds of it?
It's a good question. I thought there would be more than that, but what was the Series X, do you know?
It doesn't stay in the article, the Series X, unfortunately, not in this case. And overall, what they're basically targeting in terms of the improvement here is an improved FPS at 4K resolution, so more consistent, improved FPS, more 8K capability, and improved ray tracing.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's the current leaks. We haven't heard anything else. Couple other things worth mentioning, and then I'll come to you for your thoughts. So the likely release time is holiday season 2024. So you've still got well over a year to wait, is the guess.
Oh, okay.
Interestingly, Sony do have a history with these like 3-year mid-cycle releases. So with the PS3 and the PS4, after 3 years, they released the Slim.
Yes.
And then the Pro. The Pro and the Slim came together on the PS4, and then the Slim was the PS3. There was never a concept of a Pro. So we're now into that 3-year cycle, and that rumor seems to be correct. Although the Pro, if it's a 2024 release, would actually technically be 4 years. But if you remember the conversation we had during our Xbox versus the FTC trial discussion, there was talk of a PS5 Slim.
Yes.
So the PS5 Slim is broadly rumored to be this year.
Yeah. Q4.
Put it Q4, and the PS5 Pro next year.
Yeah.
And the Slim is rumored to have a detachable disk drive, but again, nothing is confirmed.
Detachable disk drive. Wow.
Yeah, which I think is possibly means that they might sell a disk drive separately, allowing you to presumably buy one if you had the diskless version.
Would that be the same whether you could use that separate disc add-on for the original digital consoles? It could combat that issue you had.
That's what I was wondering. It might possibly be. There was a rumor of selling a PS5 with a detachable disk drive, or it could just be that it makes it smaller and you only need it when you want to install a game, or I don't know.
True.
Don't really understand why you'd want to be able to detach it, to be honest. But anyway.
Yeah, I guess if you are installing games, that would make sense.
So, are your thoughts? Do we need a PS5 Pro?
It's interesting, actually.
Is that what you want from it?
It's interesting because I knew that the PS5 currently wasn't as powerful as the Xbox Series X, and it did kind of dishearten me a little bit because I am always on the PlayStation side more than the Xbox usually. And I really want an Xbox, but then you see all the stuff online about how much more powerful the Xbox Series X is. So I'm actually excited that they're bringing out a machine that's even slightly more powerful than the Series X, and will then, I guess, be crowned the most powerful console in the world because Xbox have got that title at the moment. It's funny, I actually watched another kind of short video the other day where they were showing even the ports are different between the Xbox Series X and the PS5. The bandwidth for the HDMI 2.1 is more on the Xbox Series X than on the PS5. So even with the power that the PS5 have, it's limited by the bandwidth of the port, even to send out the signal for the 120 hertz, 100 whatever hertz 4K it needs to do, and performs worse than the Xbox as well. So it'd be interesting if that's also addressed in this. But just generally having a more powerful PS5, I think, is quite cool. And thinking about it makes a lot of sense. Xbox, I think, have that mentality of releasing the most powerful thing straight out the gate that'll last for a very long time. I can't imagine Xbox are going to do a Pro, but maybe you prove me wrong if you go through your rumors. But then PlayStation
I'm not
famously...
going to. I don't have any rumors about an Xbox Pro in this episode. There's nothing really circling the internet. But to that point, so if we look at the previous generation, and this is one of the things I wanted to ask you, PS4 Slim got slimmer, but the PS4 Pro got a little bit fatter. Not by much, but slightly bigger than the original PS4. Xbox One was slimmed down to the one when the One X came out. The One X? Yes, Xbox One X, which was technically the Pro because it brought native 4K gaming to the Xbox One.
Oh, okay, so they have done a Pro on the back.
They did do last year, and they also released the S, which was the slimmed down chassis, but fundamentally the same device as the Xbox One, and the Xbox One X was the same body, but with more guts, more power, and 4K. So they kind of set the precedent for the Series X and the Series S on the previous generation. But, so a couple of things. One, like I said, we're not talking about an Xbox at the moment. And frankly, having the most powerful hardware has not done a great deal for them. They are inarguably third place in the console generation.
Self-proclaimed in the FTX.
Self-proclaimed third place. That power alone hasn't done it. Their lack of software has shot them in the foot.
Yeah.
So I guess the question is, does it really matter? I know that there's a community that loves graphics, power, and you were teasing me the other night on our Halo Infinite stream about the fact that yours looked nicer on your PC than what you were seeing through the stream on my Xbox. But frankly, what I was seeing was impressive to my eye, and I was enjoying it. I didn't care.
Yeah.
And I'm a big graphics person normally. Like, I'll be honest, I like the top end, the most powerful. I like all those boxes ticked. But with the PS5, it hasn't mattered. They have had an inferior console from a hardware point of view, and still absolutely decimated Xbox.
Yeah.
So, a couple of questions for you. One, do you think it matters? Two, if they're doing this, is the PS5 Pro going to be the same size as, bigger, or maybe even smaller than the current one?
Okay, cool. Well, the first question, I think it is worth getting. I think they're going to take advantage of that power, and I think I really hope that the graphics of the game increases with that as well. And I think it's a longevity thing more than anything. So the current power wasn't as powerful as the Xbox Series X, but they're doing this half refresh where if you did want that power to get even more longevity out of it, I mean, the PS4 Pro still kind of stands up today. They're still releasing PS4 games that you can do. Well, you're pulling a face, but you can still get released games, newly released games on the PS4, and the PS4 Pro will take the most advantage of that for sure. So maybe it's more about the kind of longevity.
It will, and we're in this weird position, aren't we now, where what console generations used to be was like a hard line in the sand, right? NES, SNES, different hardware, different game cartridges, completely different games. What was on the old is on the old, and what's on the new is on the new. Now, with the sort of I guess the thing that really drove you to buy the PS5 was what? There were no exclusive games. It was purely loading speed and some improved visuals. But I'd argue that the fact that they have to make these games work on so many different backwards compatible devices hampers the innovation and means that they never really harness the full power of that hardware. Are you telling me that you think right now, given almost everything on the PS5 has been backwards compatible with the PS4, couple of examples where that's not the case, but mostly, that they're really getting the most out of the PS5 right now, 3 years into that generation?
No.
I can't believe they are, if they're still making these things work on older consoles.
I think that's right, though. I think they never aim for making the most of the power. I think they aim for having just enough power to keep it going long into the PS6 era. I think that's the main aim, is that you keep the power in there enough.
My point is, it's not the hardware manufacturers, it's the software developers, isn't it? It's them that it's hampering. It's them, because of this constant drive to work across versions and be backwards compatible. Do they ever fully take advantage of the pure power, or perhaps even the unique hardware, to really make use of your current console? Do we need a step change? Are we at the point where developers are going, oh, if only I had more power, my next-gen PS5 game could have looked like this? I don't think they are. I don't think there's that much you're going to get out of it.
When they release consoles, they never take advantage straight out the gate anyway. So they're not asking for more power.
Because it takes more time development-wise, doesn't it?
But and they're still not taking as the advantage of the power of the PS5, I'd say.
That's my point. So why do you need a PS5 Pro?
Because it's going to last longer. It's going to last way longer. Yeah.
So, okay.
The PS5 Pro is going to last longer than the PS5 would in the PS6 world. I think that's what they're aiming for.
But why? What's the primary goal as a console developer?
I think they famously units, don't make a lot of money out selling their consoles. They make the money out of selling software. And the way to do that is by continuing the ability to sell software to consoles that are long out of date.
I don't know. Maybe. I mean, if you look
at the PS2, they're a software company more than a hardware company. Of course, they've got the consoles, but that's not where they make their money.
But if you've got the PS2, go look back at the PS2, the early games on that console compared to the stuff that was coming out at the end of its life cycle are, streets apart. And that's because obviously developers have learned how to get the most out of the hardware and they've really squeezed it. And then we moved to the PS3, it felt like a real, next step. I found the move from PS4 and Xbox to Series X and PS5 to be much more underwhelming because nothing really changed. The Xbox, even the interface looked basically the same. The controller was almost identical, bar one additional button, which I think I've probably pressed 3 times in the entire time I've owned that console. PS5 was more interesting because at least the controller brought some innovation.
Yeah.
We had the haptic triggers, and that's really cool, and it works well. But the problem is, when your games need to work across multiple platforms and multiple generations where that hardware doesn't exist, you're not going to bake it into the experience in the way that something that is solely built for a PlayStation 5 might do. So, for example, is that hardware being utilized? Are the haptic triggers being as impactful in the design of games as they might have been if that studio wasn't trying to make it also work on a PS4 or other types of consoles of the manufacturers as well, which is obviously a problem. But in an exclusive Sony world where some of their studios are building for, let's look at was it Horizon Forbidden West was released on PS5. It's probably one of the best looking games made. But it also works on the PS4. But of course, you don't get the haptics, you don't get the super graphics. What could that game have been like if it didn't have to work on the PS4? If they purely built that experience to take advantage of the PS5 and nothing else?
I don't know whether that is an issue though, because it's the same with PC. There's all different types of spec that you have to cater for with games, and that's why they have graphics controllers so you can scale up and scale down the quality of the graphics of the game that you're playing depending on the hardware you've got. And I think all the difference is between consoles is you just set the graphics low for PS4 and you set the graphics high for PS5.
I agree if graphics is the only thing you're interested in, but I don't think that argument works when you're talking about the gaming experience. No, just the experience. So I'll give you an example. Do you remember Dead Rising? Do you ever play Dead Rising?
I never played it, but I know of it, yeah.
Okay, so Dead Rising, the first one on the Xbox 360, because of the power the 360 had over the previous generation, they were able to put way more zombies on screen at any one time. You could therefore have that kind of horde mentality, that feeling of being overwhelmed by zombies coming at you from everywhere. And the developers said as much. They said, we couldn't have done this on the Xbox because it wasn't powerful enough to handle that many, that many zombies on screen at one time. So, if you extrapolate that forward, other experiences on the PS5, from a game design point of view, that are stifled because the PS4 has to also be able to run that game. Because graphics is one thing, as you rightly say, dial it up, dial it down. But if the game experience requires you to have to fight off 100 of these AI zombies, but the PS4 can only handle 50, then do you design... I guess you've got to design your experience for the lowest common denominator, which means the PS5 version, in order to be the same gaming experience and be balanced in the same way, etc., will also have to be limited to 50.
I don't know whether that's true, because even in the example that you gave, you said it was a different experience between PlayStation and Xbox, where you have more of the zombies.
No. It didn't exist. It couldn't exist on the Xbox.
Oh.
The developer said, we couldn't have made this game on the Xbox because it wasn't powerful enough to meet our vision. And that's what I'm talking about. And
there's plenty of examples with that with the new consoles as well. Like ray tracing isn't a thing on older consoles. Higher frame rates isn't a thing on the older consoles.
But it's graphics again, isn't it?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, and CPU
it's not
and power
fundamentally,
and all that.
But it's not fundamentally changing the storytelling or the game experience. It's just dialing up or down the visuals.
It'll definitely change the experience. I wouldn't say the story or anything, but neither does adding extra zombies.
But it could do, depending on what the experiences you're trying to give the user.
Yeah. I do think it leaves a lot more headroom for, and I think that I'm not sure whether development, I can't say for certain because I'm not a developer. I would hope though that development is not aimed at the lowest common denominator and scaled up from there. I think it's aimed at the highest common denominator and scaled down, which is much easier, just like on PC.
Yeah, I think is it? And that's wishful thinking.
I think it's because the reason I think that is because developers love showing off their beautiful games, and the way to do that is to actually develop a beautiful game, taking advantage of as much hardware as possible, and then scale it back for other consoles or other devices that have less power.
I think you're putting too much emphasis on the graphics being the only thing that is compromised. I think it's more than just the graphics that you're compromising on when you're talking about utilizing, PS4 and PS5 hardware. It's not just the graphics that changes between the devices. It's the capabilities of the CPU to deal with whatever it is you're trying to throw at it.
Yeah. And that's what I mean by it's not just the graphics, but taking advantage of the power, generally.
But like I said, you couldn't design something for the PS5 and then... Well, you could. There are examples of that. I mean, if you look at things like FIFA, for example, FIFA in the past... No, I was going to say like FIFA on PS4 and Xbox when it was back in the day was also ported to the Switch. But it was basically they kind of went, that won't work, it can't run that, hack that out. Here's 30% of the original game on PlayStation 5 or whatever it was, but it's on your Switch,
Same with Witcher.
So they absolutely have. Well, exactly. And that was a massive compromise on the experience to get that onto the Nintendo. But you don't hear those stories PS4 and PS5. Everything generally, apart from Cyberpunk, that was a very big example of where they aimed for PC in your example, and it all went horribly wrong everywhere else.
Yeah.
Because on almost every other release, it was buggy to the point of not being a saleable product.
Yeah.
Anyway, so it sounds like, if I'm hearing you correctly, you are pro.
Pro. I am pro.
You're a pro.
Unlikely. I still haven't got a PS5 yet, but I did have thoughts of waiting for the Pro.
So I was going to ask you about this, and so the question I was going to pose to you is, should you wait for a PS5 Pro, or if you're in the market, do you buy a PS5 now? Because I think, if I'm right, they've just had a price reduction as well.
They have, yeah. I saw the sales come through on the Sony website recently. It's almost like £100 off as well. Very tempting. very, very tempting. And on one hand, they said that they're not going to refresh the consoles. I think it's 8 years, the life cycle. So even if you got one now, you've got 5 years really until the next console comes out. So it's still got longevity built into it, if anyone was worried about that. So it's definitely a possibility. I personally think I might wait for either the Slim or the Pro. Can't decide. It's not down to power. I think it's more, there's other things that they'll do. I saw a video a while ago where someone was speaking about the PS5 in particular, that the later versions of the consoles, they've shrunk down the hardware inside and just kept the shell basically the same. So that's how they do that through console generations anyway, and that's why they end up developing the Slim, because it tends to be the same power as the normal PlayStation 5 in this example, but in a much smaller kind of chassis for the actual housing, because over time they didn't need it to be that big. Developers made things much smaller. So that is the tempting thing around the Slim. The Pro, I imagine they'd probably either keep the same form factor. I can't imagine them going bigger because it's massive. But
they did with the PS4 Pro. I mean, they had to,
they
presumably,
did.
But
they did. I mean, the PS4 was quite slim anyway.
Yeah, the PS5 is enormous.
PS5 is enormous. I can't imagine them making it bigger.
It's reaching desktop levels. But the problem is, I guess it's not so much the components, it's the cooling, isn't it?
Yes.
Most of the PS5 is a bloody great big fan.
Well, they've got liquid cooling on the liquid metal on the CPU, which is a new and kind of risky way of cooling.
I was going to say, I know that the alternative cooling methods to fans like water cooling and stuff look great, but they're also way more complicated and messy when they go wrong.
Yeah, so incredible that that was a feat of engineering even to start with, that they mass-produced consoles that had liquid metal cooling. It's just unheard of. That's really risky and wild, but they managed to pull it off. But as to whether I would wait, I am going to wait. But whether other people should, I don't know. I mean, it's a good deal if you can get a PS5 now. It's £100 off, maybe even closer to the release of the Slim and the PS5 Pro. It'll be even cheaper. If all you want is the PS5 for the current games and you want to just start playing it straight away and you just want a cheaper deal, then definitely get it now, because it's hard to say at this stage what the major differences are going to be between the consoles. But I am always looking for the best of the best. So I kind of want to wait for the PS5 Pro. I know Christina wants to get the Slim, but that's because historically she's always gotten the Slim version of the consoles. She did the same with the PS2, the PS3, and was there PS3? There was a PS3 one. PS3, PS4, and now she wants to do it with the PS5. So I don't know.
So
may end up getting both.
It's interesting. I think I'm more in Christina's camp than yours, even though I am like you. I am best of the best. I like to go for the highest spec thing I can buy. My problem with this is when I went Xbox to Xbox One X, the main draw was that it was 4K, and I'd got a 4K TV, and it meant that I was going to get the best from the TV and the best from the console. The thing with the PS5 Pro is that it's already 4K, it's already high-performing, high frame rate, ray tracing. These things will all be improved, and I'm sure to a keen eye and someone with the right complementary tech, it's going to look wonderful. But I don't have an 8K TV, and frankly, if I dared to suggest buying a new TV at this point, my wife would kill me. And I also don't have a high-end 4K TV. I would say it's like a mid-tier. It's not an OLED or anything. So I'm probably not going to notice the extra benefits that something like, some slightly improved ray tracing performance or improved frame rates and consistency at 4K is going to really bring. I know that you're more into the frame rates and stuff and you notice it much more. I don't really. I'm quite content with things like Gears of War running at 30 frames per second in campaign, and that to me is fine. So I don't know. I think if it was me, knowing that a PS6 is eventually going to happen, I'd probably get the experience now and start playing now, because if you don't have a PS5 in the next few months, you're going to miss out on Spider-Man 2. Now, yes, you can play it in a year or so's time. It's been and gone then. The excitement around it's gone. Yeah. And you'll be behind everybody else. So, I don't know. There's something to me about having the experience today rather than putting that off for a year. Maybe there's a bit best of both. Maybe the thing to do here is to pick up the PS5 while it's reduced and then chop it in towards the Pro next year having had a good year's use out of it, and then
build up a library of games that you can already start to port over,
and use it to take a chunk off the Pro when you're ready, if you feel you need it. If you don't, if you get there and you go, oh, actually that's not really an attractive enough prospect for me to shell out another 200, 300 or 400 quid, you've had a good year's worth of the current console and you just carry on enjoying it.
True.
Don't know.
Very, very true.
Anyway, an interesting one, but perhaps not quite as interesting as the Nintendo situation. So with PS5, we've talked about it. It's a step change. Maybe, do you, don't you? Nintendo are in a really difficult spot, I think, where they go next with the Switch. Because the Switch is now, what? I think it was 2017, did we say? So it's 6 years old, So it's been around for a while. It was already underpowered when it came out compared to its peers. It's now massively underpowered compared to current gen games. However, it's still selling gangbusters and it's doing really well for them. So, what are the rumours? I'll take you through it and then we'll see what your thoughts are. So, Again, rumoured for a second half of 2024 release, likely holidays.
Oh, okay.
The previous one was released in the March. They've said they're not going to do that this time. Some sort of quote coming out of Nintendo was that it was going to be holiday season this time. That's what they wanted to target. Which means they're going up head to head, potentially, with the PS5 Pro.
Very different consoles, though.
Very different audiences, yeah. And actually, maybe there's an argument that a brand new console, which I think this would need to be, it's not going to be a Switch Pro. I think that's already clear. It's going to be a Switch 2, whatever they want to call it. So, it's new hardware. Perhaps that's slightly more intriguing. New library. Don't know. The rumours are that developers are already in possession of dev kits.
Really?
Can you believe that or not? Yeah, that's the rumour. Apparently, they're retaining their portable format, so it's going to be cartridge-based. They're not going all digital.
Interesting.
So, sticking to their cartridges. And apparently, their screen is going to be LCD, not OLED, which the original Switches were, but of course they brought out the OLED model as that kind of premium edition.
Yeah.
And this seems to have been confirmed because Bloomberg have stated that Sharp are manufacturing these screens for a new games console that hasn't been named.
Yeah.
But it seems fairly sensible to assume that it's for the Switch.
Is it Sharp that did their previous ones? I think I saw something around that.
I don't know. It might well have been. And my question here is, before we go any further, is this a price choice to keep the cost of the Switch down? Because they did put OLEDs in the new ones and they weren't that much more expensive. Is it a resource and manufacturing choice because OLED screens are so much more in demand than LCD displays? Are they cheaper and easier to get hold of en masse to be able to produce a console to sell millions? I don't know. What do you think?
LCD these days is pretty good, to be fair. You can get some really good LCD screens. OLED is like the top tier, really. You get the absolute black screens, the really high dynamic range, and amazing brightness. But LCD, the original Switch was LCD, and it didn't seem to put off many people. I think what I would like to see, though, is definitely an increase in resolution, because it was always kind of quite low. You could see the pixels quite clearly.
720, I think it was capped at in handheld, and didn't quite go HD when docked. It was like 900 and something. So,
which, it doesn't sound crazy on paper, but when you have most smartphones that are higher pixel per inch, you can really tell the difference. If you've got your phone nearby, you're looking at your phone compared to the Switch, you can really see the difference. But also the lighting.
True.
I can't remember the Switch being really that bright. So again, it would be good to have a brighter screen with better resolution, which I think is definitely achievable, but way cheaper than OLED.
Well, that's the key, isn't it? Yes, your phone is way brighter and way sharper and much higher resolution, but it's also probably 4 times the price.
Yeah.
In terms of the hardware, and your Switch comes with the dock and controllers and whatever else. Your phone is everything. I'm not saying that they're comparable, but there's obviously a decision to be made there.
Interesting though.
Sorry.
I was going to say interesting that they're going for the same form factor, or portable form factor at least, because there was talk, at least in some of the videos I saw, and I think we might have even discussed this as well, that Nintendo rarely do the same form factor 2 generations in a row.
Well, this is the thing, isn't it? So I think they've landed on a format that really works here, and the portability, currently at least, separates them from their competitors and gives them an edge. And actually, a lot of people will buy a game on the Switch rather than their mainline consoles because they think that that particular experience is one they want to have on the go.
Yeah.
And they'll, they might not buy, Red Dead Redemption or whatever. They're going to pick the premium stuff and do that on their super fancy console on the massive TV at home. But if it's an indie title or something like that, they might be tempted where graphics are perhaps less important, or perhaps there's less of a sort of obvious difference between experiences. They'd rather have the form factor, and therefore the Switch has become so popular, especially with indie titles, they've obviously found a niche that the other two currently don't fill. Even with Project Q, it's only any good round your house, theoretically, until they prove otherwise. And Xbox haven't brought out anything official, albeit xCloud is available in many places. So I suppose while it's making them lots of money and it's been successful, why change? But then they've got examples where that's gone wrong for them. And I guess very recently, the Wii sold more than I think any other Nintendo console.
Yeah.
Immediately followed by the Wii U, which was kind of a confusing upgrade, but still backwards compatible, still supported a lot of the hardware, but had this new screen thing. It was very confused messaging, and people didn't buy it.
Yeah.
So they've got to get this right. They've got to get the messaging right. And I don't know, will this end up feeling more like one of these step change sort of small upgrades?
Maybe. If they've landed on a format.
But the other example as well, of course, is handheld. So they have the DS, sold absolutely huge numbers, one of the biggest consoles they ever had, handheld. 3DS, confused messaging again.
Yeah.
Games didn't support backwards compatibility. You didn't have the ability to play your 3DS games on a 2DS or the old DS. It was a new console, but it carried a similar name. And so what are they going to do? Like Switch 2? I don't think they'll do that. I don't think that's the naming convention they'll go for. They could do Switch U, which would be awful. What will they do? Switch? It's not going to be Switch Pro because that's not what they're doing. This is technically a brand new console.
Maybe it's
so.
Switch 2.
How do you message it and avoid those trappings?
Haven't Nintendo famously had a track record of good generation, bad generation, good generation, bad generation?
Well, yeah. I mean, and more recently, they had like NES did well, SNES did. Do you think? Don't think the SNES sold better than the NES? I think it was worse. N64 was worse, and then GameCube was worse again. Then they hit the Wii, which was like right the other way.
Yeah.
Then they crashed with the Wii U, and the Switch was right up in the air. But of course, what they've lost in that journey is they were always good with handhelds. Generally, Game Boy great, Game Boy Color great, GBA did well, SP was like an iterative version of that. That did well. The DS did really well. 3DS dropped off.
Yeah.
And then they got rid of their portables because they blended into the Switch. So now we've just got one that does both.
Yeah.
And I think there is a real risk that whatever they do with this next console, it might tank. Like it's got to do something really well. And actually, so much of the Switch's success from a software perspective has been importing Wii U games that didn't really land or didn't get an audience, and then kind of enhancing them and making them ultimate versions. I'm really concerned for things like Mario Kart. How do you better Mario Kart 8 Deluxe with all the DLC? Because it's packed full of characters, packed full of tracks. Surely Mario Kart 9, if such a game exists. I mean, I don't know where that stands. How does that compete? Smash Brothers. They literally called it Smash Brothers Ultimate, and they put every character that's ever been in it, and some more. What follows that?
Yeah.
How do you follow that? So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, obviously, Zelda's done really well for them with Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. I don't know if Tears of the Kingdom has sold as well as Breath of the Wild, even though it's, by all critics' account, the better game. I think Breath of the Wild kind of captured people. Tears of the Kingdom probably felt like evolution rather than revolution. So will they do another Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom style Zelda, or do what they'd previously done and change to something quite different in between each game? It's really difficult. They seem to have had such a successful console generation that it's hard to think about the next generation bettering it. And, if cloud gaming is kind of on the verge, as was kind of argued in the FTC case and with, what was the name of the UK governmental body that was trying to block it? CMA, was it? Something like that?
Can't remember.
They were also leaning into the cloud side rather than the Call of Duty side as being the problem with the Activision Blizzard takeover. If cloud gaming is up next, is there a serious threat to Nintendo's appeal? If Steam Deck example became like a mainstay and everyone had high-end games on a portable device, do you need a Nintendo Switch to differentiate that when you could have your PS5 Q, Project Q2, or whatever it's called,
Difficult.
So no, I think it's really difficult. I think it really is difficult for them.
Nintendo's always, they've made it pretty clear that they don't compete with any other console manufacturers really, but their biggest competition is themselves.
Yeah,
always has been.
They've got the franchises. Pokemon continues to sell huge numbers. Mario sells well. Zelda sells well. So they've got their software side down. As long as those games continue to innovate and be impressive. But that wasn't enough with the Wii U to keep it alive. They had some great games technically because they all got ported and sold really well on the Switch. It wasn't enough to prop that generation up. The lack of third-party support killed them. The Switch has seen the opposite. It's had a huge third-party support.
Yeah.
So presumably whatever they do next needs to retain that as well. And if they veer too far away from kind of standard mechanics, the Wii was challenging because it had a brilliant innovation in the Wiimote, but that was really hard to port games to from an Xbox or a PlayStation. The Switch doesn't have that challenge because it's much more conventional in terms of its control scheme. Even though the Joy-Cons have got like advanced tech in them, most games don't utilize them. So what will the new game console's gimmick be? What will the Switch 2 do differently without taking it too far away from, what people or developers need to manufacture for to make cross-console games successful?
Yeah, that's a really good point. They often do kind of shoot themselves in the foot with these gimmicky features that no one develops for. Just like the 3D screen on the 3DS.
Well, exactly. That's a great example. So there was one of the questions that was coming up when I was reading about it, which I wanted to debate with you as well, is whether or not the Nintendo Switch 2 will be backwards compatible with the original Switch. And that's unclear. Nintendo hasn't really offered much in the way of backwards compatibility in the past. They've done a little bit. So the Wii games worked on the Wii U. Game Boy games and Game Boy Advance, etc., kind of would often go with the next generation. But also Nintendo have done a fantastic job of selling third-party software. Selling their software again on a second, third, fourth console, and are charging you for the privilege. So, is it in their interest to have it backwards compatible? I don't know what your thoughts are. What do you think? Will you be playing your Switch games on a Switch 2 in 12 months' time?
I hope so for the consumers, but I can see them not letting you do that. They don't really. There's a few examples of it working on previous generations, as you mentioned, but I think if it's going to be an iterative change, not really anything wild that's new about the Switch 2, surely they're going to need to have some exclusive games specifically for that console. Otherwise, there's not a lot of incentive to get that version of the console, right? And certainly as well, if it's going to have more power. I saw a rumor the other day about the Switch 2 having, which doesn't sound a lot, but for a handheld it is, having the same amount of power, if not a little bit more powerful than the PS4 in terms of hardware, in terms of teraflops. Having that much power means that you can have better games on there, and so that it won't be possible to have that on the older consoles. But whether you can bring older ones to the new one, again, I hope they do, but again, they've shot themselves with the foot with some of the really elaborate Ultimate games that they've got at the moment. And I think they're probably going to need to bring out new versions of those to sell on the new console. So I just can't imagine them bringing the older kind of Ultimate Mario Kart games and the older Smash Bros. Ultimate game to the new console, just allowing users to do that. I just can't see it happening.
Which is interesting because it's kind of the opposite of what you said about PlayStation.
Yeah.
In that everything with your PS5 to 6 and Pro in between argument is that kind of iteration. Your games can be played on all of them. It's like up-resed, etc. And I completely agree with that. But I also completely agree with what you're saying about Nintendo.
Yeah. They've always had a different mentality for it. I think they like a clear separation.
If they radically change the hardware, that's always been a sort of fairly comfortable argument. Oh, well, that game used the Joy-Cons and we don't have Joy-Cons anymore and that, therefore it doesn't work. But if they're going to go for something that sort of feels like a hardware upgrade to the Switch, then I think they'd have a really job arguing against providing backwards compatibility.
Yeah.
Certainly from a digital point of view, perhaps they could make the argument that, well, we don't have the cartridge slot anymore because the new cartridges are different.
Yeah.
But if you've got a vast library of digital games, like a lot of Switch owners do, and it's just like a performance upgrade, then it'd be really difficult for them to argue or not to not provide backwards compatibility. It's a nice to have, isn't it? Turn your brand new console on and not be limited to the one game you bought at launch. You can pick up and play your old games. It also doesn't necessarily incentivize you to buy the new ones because you've got your old games to carry on playing. The one thing that I hope for, and I touched on this with the PlayStation, I don't mind backwards compatibility. I just don't want every game they release to be on every bloody console. So, give me a reason to upgrade. Give me a real reason, not just a small tech boost, to move to your new hardware and shell out 300 quid or whatever it is. Give me exclusives. And I say the same with the PS5. I'm all for PS4 games working on a PS5. But if I've spent £500 on a new console, which I did at launch, give me experiences that only I can experience. Now, I know that doesn't really work from a business perspective because business senses make the game and make it available to as many places as possible, to as many people as possible, to sell as many copies. But as the consumer, when I've just dumped a load of money on your new hardware, I want something that I couldn't have on my previous one.
Yeah.
More than just, it looks prettier. I want more than that. So part of me hopes that Nintendo will bring out new experiences that only work on this Switch 2, as well as allowing players to buy up old Switch games, bring their libraries across and all that good stuff.
Be brutal if they didn't, but not surprising.
Not unheard of. I mean, when you bought your Switch, you didn't get your Wii U library.
True.
So that was a complete start from scratch. And of course, the other thing that they've done as well is that all of their old games, are now available through the online subscription as part of the virtual console library. So whereas they've sold those before, they now effectively rent them to you. Presumably that would just roll straight over, and if you've got online membership, those games come with you. I don't know.
You'd hope so.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what they do. I think we're way off finding anything out. I think the earliest you'll get any official release will be probably March next year, I would guess. But if devs have got this stuff now, it's not going to take long for this stuff to start leaking. So
yeah, true.
It's probably coming.
Yeah, that's exciting. I'm excited on both fronts that developers are testing them out. Did you say they're testing out the PS5 Pro now as well?
Apparently, yeah. I mean, there's rumours. Yeah, apparently the dev kits have been shown to both. So that brings me to my final question for you, Robbie, and final thoughts, really. What does this mean for Microsoft and Xbox? Should we be expecting a Pro device from them? Is that their focus? Or are they focusing on catching up with software and maybe leaning into their cloud-first focus and pushing more into cloud? Because that seems to be the fear, at least, from the companies looking into their Activision Blizzard purchase. What do you think?
I think the obvious thing for them to do would be push more on the software side of things. I know they mentioned that the cloud streaming and things like that are beta features. It's not something that makes them a lot of money, but it's clearly a popular feature. And I think if they leaned more into that, you don't necessarily need to bring out a Pro version because it's not going to take advantage of it anyway. And the console is powerful enough as it is. more powerful, the most powerful, in fact, at the moment. I don't know. I can't see them bringing out a Pro anytime soon. You've got I suppose what's different between Sony and Microsoft is they brought out the slightly underpowered version of their console already at launch with the S, which you could argue is like their version of the Slim, and then the Pro, which would be their version of the X.
Well, yeah, exactly. Even the naming conventions, Series X, Series S, suggests that might be an ongoing plan for these kind of like low-end, high-end hardware options. So
I don't know whether they need it though.
The Series S did get its 1 terabyte release, hasn't it? It's got a comparable hard drive now to the Series X as a result of the black one that they launched over the summer.
Yeah.
So there's a Series S Black. Yeah, I'm with you. I say I can't see them doing it. I can absolutely see it happening, because why wouldn't they? If the other two are, it might have to. But what would you get again? Especially given they've got a real lack of software compared to PlayStation and Nintendo, who've got big booming popular licenses. God of War, Horizon Zero Dawn, Final Fantasy's kind of locked in now for the most part, or at least new releases on Sony and beyond. Xbox just don't have a lot to shout about on the software front. So if I've already got a Series X and I'm feeling like I'm not getting value from Microsoft, if I've got money to burn on a Pro device, I might also choose to burn that on a PlayStation.
Yeah.
So
you have one of each.
Yeah, exactly. Why would you upgrade that Xbox if you're not getting the software support from Microsoft? Unless you feel you are. I mean, there are lots of happy Xbox customers out there. I'm not an unhappy Xbox customer, but I can see the argument when it comes to that sort of lack of software. And if they are focusing more on cloud and they see that as the differentiator, actually that takes a lot of pressure off the hardware race. Because if they can get the cloud stuff working and working well, actually then the server side has to have the beefy machines with the big powerful GPUs.
True.
And all they've got to do is be able to stream it down to you efficiently. Maybe instead they'll enter the handheld race.
Maybe, but focus on the streaming side of things. Although I don't know why they would need to, because you can basically get it on any phone at the moment, right?
Well, that's true. Again, and they've always had this, very recently at least, this ethos of bringing your games to you wherever you want to play them.
Yeah.
Whether that's been like the Samsung xCloud app that you could install on many, many Samsung TVs, your mobile phone. There was a dongle rumored at one point, like the Google Chromecast. You just plug in and it would just enable you to play xCloud on your TV.
Wow.
Those are all quite interesting, compelling ideas, aren't they?
Yeah.
Although the kind of buzz for cloud gaming seems to have dropped off a little bit.
Yeah. I think it's
they're probably converting all their server farms for xCloud into OpenAI now.
True.
It's all going to be Bing's GPT. They're
saving
turn
all
those
the
gaming
GPUs.
servers off. No one's using them. Yeah, make it do AI instead.
Yeah, it's a good point. There is a shortage, I guess, of GPU servers specifically. So you might be right.
They'll have many of them.
They will have many of them. I mean, to support xCloud, they'll have to have a ton. But for the AI stuff, even more.
So I don't know that I need to ask you this question. Are you more interested in a PS5 Pro or a Switch 2?
PS5 Pro for me, I think I'm interested in, definitely. Switch 2, it's very cool. I'm sure Christine will be interested, but I don't know whether I'm particularly that interested. I'm not that invested in the Nintendo world. You'll know from my historical knowledge of Nintendo is not amazing, so it's not really something I've been madly excited about. But the PS5, definitely. I still haven't got a PS5. It's on the list of things that I will be getting at some point. So it's just whether I wait now till the Pro's released, or the Slim even. But yeah, no, I'm way more excited for that, for sure.
I would say I'm in the opposite camp, because
Really?
I do have a PS5.
Yeah.
So, which doesn't get a lot of use, to be perfectly honest. So unless the PS5 Pro significantly improves my experience of it, which I can't see how it can without me buying the 8K TV or whatever. It might be interesting to see if it does anything to PSVR 2.
That would be cool.
Although, frankly, that's not getting the support either at the moment. But then I think for me, the idea of a brand new console is more exciting because it's that generation jump. What are they doing next? What's the next innovation that's changing the game? Air quotes, in terms of what Nintendo are trying to do. And they do weird stuff. And I hated the Switch when I first saw it. I laughed at it and thought, why would I ever buy that?
Really?
And then it was like one of the most popular consoles, and I love mine. So, I'm happy to do a reaction video at some point in the future, shit all over the Nintendo announcement, and then buy one, like the mug that I am. I would say I'm more interested in the Switch 2, just because I suspect it will change things, whereas I'm sure PS5 Pro will be technically incredible, but because it's a step change, they can't fundamentally change the experience.
Yeah.
That will be reserved for PS6.
Interesting.
So that's it for this episode. Nothing more to debate at this point. We'll keep our eyes on the market and see what else changes, what other rumours come out, and we'll pick them up as we go. But thank you for joining us for this episode and hanging out with us. Don't forget to like and subscribe on YouTube if that's where you're watching us. And if you're listening on one of the many great podcast services out there, then please do subscribe. Maybe even vote, give a little rating, whatever it is you can do on that platform, and make sure not to miss an episode. You can also watch us on our weekly gaming streams on YouTube at Jay and Robbie, where we stream a variety of games. We haven't been overly consistent recently just due to travel, but we are going to try and get back to doing that at least sort of once a week when we can. But that's it for today. We'll see you next time.